on.
Good for you 8, buddy.
All right. So gonna get started. Welcome to episode 2 of the Greatest Hits. I'm Master John Drake. I'm joined today by Duke Miguel, who is also Master Defense. Duke Miguel has won Ansteorra and Queen's Champion 7 times, which is the record. He's won 3 crowns. He's trained some of the other best fighters in the SCA. Had a hand in my own training, so welcome, Miguel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, John.
So if you could maybe, usually the way I start this is just like, if you want to, like, I kind of gave some of your credentials, but if you want to elaborate and brag about yourself a little bit, please.
That's good. Yeah, it's awkward, but yeah, I've had some pretty good success over the years. I started out with not a whole lot of training, formal training. I met up with Galen Nicole and Don Robin early on, and they gave me some pointers, and then I just kind of developed my own style. I wasn't as big of a period student as some of the other guys on this thread that I know that they are, but you know, I had a great passion for it. I'm probably better at fencing than anything else I've ever done, you know. I was thinking of, I know before you asked how many tournaments Dominic had won, and I think it was like 7,000 or something. But I haven't, you know, it's interesting because other than the Queens, a couple Rose tournaments in Kingdom, and that one Penzic tournament I entered, I stopped trying to win tournaments mostly back in the 90s. And so I've only won a few dozen, I guess. I don't know, 2 dozen, 4 dozen, something in that range. When I switched over to heavy, it was kind of a, you know, I had to kind of give up tournament fencing for a while just to get good at heavy. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of turned around and won back-to-back crowns. And then I felt like I was supposed to be putting on the show rather than taking all the spotlight. So you probably haven't seen me win more than like 1 or 2 things besides Queens, if that, in the whole time that you've been playing. So
it's quality over quantity, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, Avery probably remembers back when I was kind of on a rampage back in the 90s, but not a whole lot of folks around here do.
What about training other fighters? It's something you've had successful students, obviously.
Yeah, so clearly my most famous student was Don Brendan, who's won 5 Queen's Champions, and is arguably a better fighter than I am. If I had a gun held to my head and I had to fight Brendan or you or your brother, it would be a really difficult choice, and I'd probably choose one of you 2 guys, even though you're probably technically a little hotter right now, because he just knows all my moves. Mm-hmm. And so Brendan's amazing in his ability to perceive and that kind of thing. And then Brendan trained Ingrid, and who's also a couple-time Queen's Champion, I think, as well. And then Ingrid helped train Connell, and she's done pretty well for herself as well. So, yeah, we've had a pretty decent run of it. I also had a cadet, Valentine Drake, who became a Don, who was pretty darn good too for, you know, Etienne and Avery and some of the folks that remember him. And so, yeah, I've had some success with that, but I've also had some failures with it. And I think we talked about it on a call with the female fighters before, and I tend to have a type of personality and such that I can train. And then, you know, people that I just can't seem to connect with. Mm-hmm. That's something I'd like to continue to work on. But
yeah, well, yeah. I think training is like, it's a skill just like fighting. It has to be practiced and developed.
Yeah, and finding people of like mind is, I guess, the easy approach to doing it. And then for the people that are much better at training, who can basically teach anybody that they can get a hold of, which it seems to be one of your skill sets. Then, you know, that's definitely very, very handy for the whole community rather than just, you know, 1 or 2 people, you know.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. So let's go. I'm gonna go ahead and bring up some of the videos here. Start sharing my screen. everyone can tell me if that's working for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. These are kind of in a random order. If there's one you wanted to start with, we can start with that, or.
Yeah, we can start with the Kelly one at Nicolet's Queens. I'm kind of curious about that one. You cut out I appreciate it, I guess, but you cut out the one where he beats me. So I'm really curious of what he beat, because he won the first point of 3.
Yeah.
And so it starts out at 2 here.
I don't, because I think Kelly uploaded this video, so I don't think, so I think he maybe there was sometimes, we're trying to film all the fights at once and he missed parts of it. Yeah. So, kind of in my notes here, part of this process I'm going to ask is like, so if you wanted to since you have your stance here, right? Like you want to describe why you stand that way and your thought process on that.
Yeah. So that's actually pretty classic of me. I'm standing a little too wide, which is kind of a bad habit. When I fight Brendan, I tighten it up or he'll take my toe. But my stance is I put both feet together and I rotate my right foot out at 90 degrees. And then I take a shoulder width step and then I crouch into it. And then I raise my right hand up until it's pointing somewhere between the belly and the middle of the chest of my opponent. And I fight almost all of my fights that way, as you'll see from this. And I don't tend to vary a whole lot unless I have fighting somebody that has a very unusual style. Mm-hmm. The reason I fight in this particular way is that I have, you'll occasionally see me leaning back and there's some bad form in that. But from this position right here, I can move forward or backward pretty easily. And that's why I fight with this particular stance.
Makes sense. What about your sword and your secondary? Do you have preferences, favorite style, why you choose to fight with the sword or the secondary you choose?
Yeah, thanks. I'm a single sword fencer, and I did kind of quit fencing the SCA for a while to do theater, and also quit for a while to do competition fencing outside the SCA. And in Epee, it was a B-ranked national fencer. But I love the purity of form of the single sword. When you've got the single sword in front of you, you're like a computer program. Everything has to go through the sword. And so it's your offense, it's your defense, it's your primary offense, it's your defense. And it's just, I can just completely sink into it. And probably in some of the ones you'll see, my thrusts are better when I've got a single sword and all that kind of thing. Because of the massive increase in the number of dagger fighters, I would say since this guy named John and Miguel started some years ago, it's been, you just can't go into a tournament without expecting to be stabbed by somebody with a dagger. And I'm not particularly good with a dagger. And so, as you see here, I picked up a short sword that is my stay away from me dagger fighters, which allows me to fence single sword and threaten people who run in at me with a dagger. And so after a while, I got good enough with this that some people in Ansteorra seem to think that I was a pretty good two-sword fighter, but it's really not very true. I'm a single sword fighter with a long dagger.
That makes sense. So I'll go ahead and play some of this video here. So we will look at that again.
That's where she's going.
Oh, they call Walrus kids special needs.
Okay. If y'all can mute yourself, if you're not Miguel or me, please mute yourself. Okay, what are we doing? Okay. So let's watch this exchange at slow motion. So it looks like your sword just misses Kelly's head. And you parry the riposte. And then hit him in the chest with a second shot.
Yeah, it's easier for me to spot the bad things that I'm doing. So what you'll see here is I refuse my guard too far back after the initial thrust, but I'm getting his blade out of the way as I do. And then as I lunge at him, I rotate my right foot forward which is a bad habit because what it does is it minimizes your extension. So I don't know if maybe I was trying to put on the brakes from going at him, and that's why I rotated. But it's not great form I did there. It's just that he had a pretty wide opening across the center line, and I was just kind of going for it.
Makes sense. I think it's totally valid to point out what you see you're doing stuff wrong, because it's kind of, I think, part of the process of fighters who are very, very talented, right? Who have had a lot of success, is that you have to be very critical of your fight, right? And so, of course, the negatives are going to pop out more than the positive.
Yeah. And he's really not giving me a lot, as you can see from this. He's not like super open or anything like that. But his parries tend to be a bit on the large side. And so because his parries are large and controlled from his arm and his elbow, it's creating windows of opportunity that I think my lizard brain's picking up on.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And you'll see it here in a second. As I thrust at him, he drops. See, he's dropping his sword tip down. And so I test that a couple times here, and then it's like, then you can see where it's like, well, I'm just going to try and take advantage of of throwing and then extending into the opening he creates. Right there, you see him really dropping it down there.
Well, and he also takes the step here without really controlling the line, right?
Yeah.
Oh, very nice. So let's see. We'll go to the next video. Let's go ahead and watch the other fights from Nicolette's Queen, since we're on this. Since we're on that, I have to.
And Nicolette's Queens was my 6th Queens champion to win. And it was after a pretty big hiatus of entering any kind of tournament. So it was probably 17 years since I had fenced seriously in the Queens or something like that. 17, 18 years.
14, because I think the one before was in 99.
Well, okay.
It was Sarah's.
Oh, okay. So
it's probably got to be one of the longer gaps between winning Queen's Champions.
I would think so. If Robin's the historian for all that kind of data, but
there.
So I like this. I like this exchange because you totally get him to make a big parry and then go right around it with this little pump fake here.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's exactly what I had determined, was that he was a circle parry guy, and so I will take advantage of that to initiate a move and then kind of do a little circle parry around it. And this one's kind of big, but and normally I'm not this aggressive. So I'm trying to remember the bout and why I was this aggressive with it, but it was just something in this particular stance and the way he was moving that told me that I could be more aggressive without much of the ramifications.
Do you like to have a lot of knowledge, information about your opponent before you go into the fight, or do you not really care either way?
Yeah, I don't care. I mean, it's always better to know your opponent, but then when you know your opponent, they also probably know you. And so I'm going to bet more often than not that I'll be able to figure my opponent out before they'll be able to figure me out. So that's why I don't go out at the beginning of tournaments and warm up and do all these other things that most people do. It's like, I don't feel like I need to. And all it does is kind of show people, all the terrible things that I obviously am doing here ahead of time. So I'd rather figure it out on the fly.
Makes a lot of sense.
And this is probably the most atypical fight in the whole thing. But as you can see, I have my single stance, and I'm very aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
It's quarters. I'm tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of the same thing again. He makes this big parry, and you just go right around it.
Yeah. And I think I knew that he was a mobile fighter, so if I was going to throw shots, I had to get in on him.
Skip to the next. Here we go.
There's Avery.
Yeah.
So you'll notice a very different fight out of me here, because I know that if I...
Sorry to interrupt. There's some questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was about to just read that. I can't make it full screen because it slows my computer down too much. Let's see. We're usually scooping it out. Okay, hold on. Sorry, this is a backlog. Let me read the most recent one. I noticed you were going from a guard, then pulling back to chamber your thrust. Is there an intent to that?
Yeah. So sometimes it's just bad form, honestly. But a number of times, and you'll see it, I think, in one of these fights with Avery, where I trigger that as a way to get my opponents to do something, and then I play a read option on when I release it from where it is. And so, especially for people that like to beat hard or manipulate my blade, I'll pull back and pretend to shoot from pretty far back on the hip to get them to throw the parry early. And you'll see probably 2 or 3 examples of that in these fights.
Makes sense. Let's see.
But sometimes it's just bad form.
When you probe at Kelly, were you intentionally scoping him out to adapt to your fight?
Yes.
Because you kind of answered that already. So.
Yeah.
And then someone wants to know what happened to your hair. Did it time travel from the 70s to the 70s?
It's COVID. He has a hairstylist in Dallas. We'll see her next week after our second vaccine shot.
That's a good answer. And I have the chat open now, so if anyone puts stuff in there, I'll be a little quicker to read it.
Avery has a very, very fast snapshot. And so you'll see me not wanting to get too far into the range of it until he's moving backwards. And once he's moving backwards, then I try not to let him out of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think there are those fighters you want, like once you get them moving back, you can kind of keep them moving back or keep them defending, but you don't want them to like be able to set up.
Yeah. And so I'm just testing to see what the response is here on his wrist. I don't necessarily think I'm going to get it, but how far does he drift his sword up into the outside when I do throw that attack?
Mm-hmm. So kind of using it to see if it'll give you something else.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's exactly what we're talking about. Here it is at slow motion.
Yeah. And as you can see, I'm doing a lot of pairing with my attacking blade as well.
Mm-hmm.
My predominant thought in both heavy and light, and also the cut and thrust, is just don't die. It's great to have a great offense, but I just don't want to be hit. And so even in these offensive sequences, you'll see parries being thrown in the midst of an attack. Sometimes I'll stop an attack and then throw the defense. In that kill, it was just stay on Avery and because he's completely squared up. And whenever your opponent is completely squared up, the range is extremely limited. And so if he's squared up and moving backwards, there's just not as much chance of him getting you as it is for you in a thrust mode to get him.
So essentially, I'm gonna pause for a second. So essentially, at that point, you're not worried about him killing you. So you're just gonna attack until you can get him.
I wouldn't say I'm not worried at all, but I know that I've got the advantage, and that you've got to take advantage of those advantages whenever you get a chance, because with an equal ranked fighter, if you've got a 70% chance on one series of attacks, that's better than a 50-50. So yeah, I wouldn't say I thought he definitely wouldn't kill me, but I thought the chances were reduced because of the biomechanical efficiency of the thrust versus the squaring up and moving back.
So we have a question in the chat. It's like, do you think these fighters would have fared better had they used lateral movement as you advance to strike?
Absolutely, yes.
I think it's a good question, and I agree with the answer. I think if I can elaborate on that 1 second, I think if someone's advancing on you hard, you can take one step back, but after that, 1 to 2 and before you need to start breaking the angle. Once you've taken a third step straight back, then they probably are going to catch you at that point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're really good at spotting when someone's about to attack, if the first move is lateral, you gain so much advantage. But it's just the timing on that is just crucial. So somebody better have a very good tell if you're going to move lateral as soon as they move forward.
I agree with that. So start playing the video again.
So I'm pump faking to see how far Avery's blade's going to go down. And if it goes down too far, I'll come over the top of it.
Yeah, because he kind of has the blade a little high there. That makes sense.
So I'm not going to throw under it now. He stole my sword.
Yeah, I'm going to slow-mo this exchange and we can see what happens. Looks like he tries to cover you down. You slip it back.
And I thrust and get a scar.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then your sword, it's tangled in his scarf.
Yeah. So I let go of it rather than stand there until he stabbed me. Because at this point in time, like a real sword wouldn't have gotten caught, but the tip did. So
yeah, I
let go of it because there's, and I don't want to rip it out and then try to stab him because I might rip the tip off and then stab him.
That's a very good point. Yeah. I do like how the marshal was like, because this is where the sword was when the hold was called. That's where we will put it.
Yeah.
A little silly, but.
But I guess valid if I had an offhand weapon. I don't remember if Avery, had agreed on styles ahead of time or not. I think so.
We had, it was case first round and then single the second round. And then if we needed a third, we'd figure it out.
Oh, okay. And once again, this goes to the point I fake him out with my initial arm pullback. And now I have all the advantage and his sword's not even pointed at me. So I'm just going to keep throwing until I'm threatened.
Yeah. It's actually kind of surprising that you didn't hit him with this first shot because he's so out of position here.
Yeah. I think he gets part of a parry on it or something.
Yeah. But it's kind of, the point is that once you've gained initial advantage, as long as you keep it, you can eventually get the kill, I think.
Yeah. And you can get quite a few attacks. In heavy, you really only get 2 or 3, but in light, because there's no shield and that kind of thing, you get quite a few. If there's field, you can just kind of keep going back.
Yeah, definitely in this cleans, this video and the last one, you killed your opponent the same way both times. You've basically got them to make an over parry with their sword and then just kept attacking until you killed them after that. Yeah,
so back in the 80s and 90s, I was pretty fast. And so I didn't do that much in the épée days. I kind of one-shot a lot of people in the head and that kind of thing. But as I got slower and the swords got heavier, I had to kind of adapt in my technique into baiting and that kind of thing.
Well, these swords we use now are literally slower as well. So
yeah.
So this is the finals of this tournament against Crowley.
So he's not giving me a whole lot. His feet are too close together to do anything with his feet. His hands are pretty well protected as well. And he's a very, as you can see here, he's in better shape than I am. So he's very fit and he's got good agility. So you kind of have to, you kind of have to play it by ear and just, I fight more defensively. So this is another one where you see me fight very defensively. I'm waiting for some sort of a sign that I've got an opening.
Mm-hmm. Well, and right here, you gave the little fake, but he just backs out.
Yeah.
Which is a better response than other fighters you've had so far.
Yeah. But the one thing in there is that his defense is a big circle parry.
Yes.
So if you want to go back to that, I think whenever you're fighting people that are like Crowley here, that big move right there, it's fast. You can barely see the blade in it, but there's plenty of opportunity for getting around that if your timing is good. Clearly mine wasn't in this one, but that was an opening.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely, yeah.
And also, since he's backing up into a square, there was plenty of target there. And I'm not quite sure why I didn't go for it, if I was just a little anxious because it was the finals of Queens and I hadn't fought in one in 14, 15,
and at that point you knew you wanted to win. So.
Yeah, and I decided somewhere around Avery that I kind of wanted to take this one. So
totally makes sense, yeah. I kind of think the range might not have been there. Like by the time the opening was you saw it, I think the range was already too long.
Yeah,
from what I would think.
I agree. I mean, at least for my current shape. I mean, I think if we were all in good lunging shape, that it would have been fine. But I wasn't, as you can see by my pudge.
His boot had fallen down a little bit, so they were checking that. This was also a hot, humid day in Houston, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I do remember it was hot.
Yeah.
Even though it was fall, it was very warm.
Ansteorra fall is different than.
Yes, it was technically fall.
So normally when someone's elevating their blade like that, I'll take a shot for the foot, but because he's pretty athletic, I just didn't feel like the advantage was there with it.
Yeah. I'm really surprised that because this was a great opportunity. I'm surprised it didn't quite land. I guess he just sucks it in there.
Yeah.
But once again, with the huge circle parries.
Yeah. And also at the beginning of that, I probably pull my thrust because he just leaves his sword right up there, right? And so it was, I don't think it escaped my notice that his sword was floating around in front of my chest, so.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
And I'm just resetting there.
Yeah.
But look how clean his resets are back into form.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't get to chase him super far before he's kind of back on guard.
So you kind of hinted at this before, but when you're kind of just coming on guard, do you tend to think about like the hand and the foot as your opening move?
Yeah.
And what's your theory on that? Because they're the closest targets probably, or the safest to hit?
Yeah, so, and he gets my hand there, so it's kudos to him. I seldom get my hand taken, but the first thing that pops into my head is when somebody sticks out their hand, whether I can see it or not, because there was a time when if I could see it, I could hit it. If you're doing your point control practice, it's pretty good chance that you can hit somebody's hand, whether with a straight shot or with a broken wrist shot as you throw and then drop that wrist down into it. So even if it doesn't look open, the view from your eyes and the view from your hand are different. So I might not see it with my eyes from the position I'm at, but the sword still could potentially get there. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so the first idea is always, can I take a free hand? And then if that's not going to pan out, which you never see it in any of these bouts I was watching, never really pans out that anybody accepts a hand shot, then I go to, well, if somebody's drifting their sword in various directions, or if you'll see this here in another bout where somebody goes defensive stance and leaves that foot out there, if it's not guarded, it's a free shot. And so that's when I will go for those.
Very cool. So it looks like killing blow here. It looks like he just kind of sets up a little too close almost.
Yeah.
You can't quite see from the angle here, but.
Yeah, it was a little close. And then as you can see, once again, poor form on my part, as I'm throwing, it's rotating my front foot such that.
Oh, yeah.
So that's not ideal, guys. And as you can see, I'm bending a little bit and the butt goes out. So some sloppy form for sure. And at some point we double and then
yeah, I think this is the double here.
Yeah. And so as you can see, there's nothing really spectacular about my fencing in any of these bouts so far. It's really just fighting defensively, watching for my opponent to create an opening, and then getting out of the way when I feel like it is not to my advantage.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think some of that stuff sounds simple, but it's really the key. The key is to being a good fighter, I think. I don't know what happened on that one. I'm gonna rewind it.
I punched him in the head. I punched him in the head with my pommel, so I called hold.
Okay, that makes sense. I went back a little too far.
But he's not giving me a lot. I mean, from like his foot position doesn't change a whole lot, except he cross steps a little bit when he's going backwards. The brawling stuff's always rough to watch.
Yeah, we'll skip it. We'll keep going.
And then I think he gets too close is all.
Yeah,
that was it right there.
And so, I think he did one of those circle parry things again, and you killed him for it.
Yeah. So I will register circle parries. I don't know if Bao's on, but when he started training with us up in the steps, he was pretty bad about Elaine. He was pretty bad about the circle parry, and I would just throw. And what you do is you corkscrew around it. I don't think that's what I did specifically there, but if you can time that corkscrew, then you just circle parry around it at the same speed and then throw. Definitely not what I did there. I just refused my blade, but that's how you can do that.
I'll say fighting my brother definitely taught me to not do big parries like that, because he will just eat your lunch for that. So
Yeah.
okay, do you have a preference for the next one?
No.
Let's stick on the queens and do this Sonia's queens one. And then let's see.
So Sonia's queens, I was in a little bit better shape. I think it was about a year before when I had won queens. So.
Well, no, this is the last one you won.
Yeah. The Nicolette's was like
Nicolette's was in 2013. This was 2016.
Oh, okay. 3 years. So I've had 3 years to get in shape.
I think it was maybe like 3.5, because I think Nicolette's was in the fall. This is in the spring, but yeah. 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. This is Duke Mahadi, and so what you won't see me do is throw for his feet.
This will show it in slow-mo here in a second.
Yeah.
So this is something we didn't see in any of the other fights. You're actually throwing a shot here with your left hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'd had some practice since the last queens with Florentine, and in that particular bout, Mahdi takes a bad step there and he turns his foot, which is, what I was talking about myself earlier. It's just a danger. And because the energy has to go somewhere, it then spins the back part of his body around.
Yeah.
And so you see his back foot come forward. At this point in time, he's just a victim waiting to be stabbed. And that's the case with anybody who ends up in this position. And because he was throwing his shots from his shoulder and his elbow, as you can tell, kind of some big motions to the outside, his defense is not refined enough once I can take a center line attack line here. And so that's what I do. He's a great athlete and a great fighter, but once he's moving backwards, and even with his range, it's just not a good position to be in.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, his feet are together and crossed. So
yeah. And there's nothing to shoot at the hands, so I don't. There's nothing that it's too dangerous to shoot out on a guy who's 6'4" at his feet when he's got his sword pointed, right where he's got it. So I'm just not going to do it. I take a couple dinks at his left hand, but nothing serious.
And those look really more like you're just trying to get him to react to something.
Yeah, and he does eventually here in a second. Mm-hmm. And what you can kind of see too is that anytime my opponent starts to get a position I don't like, I just move out of it.
Yeah, and that's a really key point, I think. This will show this here at slow-mo in a second.
There goes his blade.
Yeah.
And now I've got the center line and I've got him moving backwards.
Yeah. And I will say, just to be clear on this, Mahdi does get this hit in here, but this was very late. And he called it back.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I actually really like this hit here, because you get his hands to move, and then you just
then
work
I pick up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I throw, and this is what I was suggesting to Rowan last time we talked, was that you throw not to get the shot, even if you're faster than they are, you throw to get the initiation of the parry. Then you throw a parry on the obvious counter response to your attack line, and then you go in kind of in the neutral space.
Yeah. So you kind of counter the counter.
Yeah. You anticipate the counter so you can throw and then, start back up. But clearly I didn't do it well enough. So if you didn't call it back, that's a double right there.
Yeah. Let's see. Here we go. It's against Don Trevor, who he moved to Ansteorra from the Allens a few years ago. And someone said it's kind of neat watching two dukes fight with rapiers.
Two dudes?
Two dukes.
Oh, Trevor's not a duke.
No, in the last fight, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Mahadi really, Mahadi was a duke who fought light for a while, but he's absolutely a rapier fighter now. He really refined his form.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do that one again? Let's see.
It should show it here in a second in slow-mo, I think. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, so he just creates a, oh, he got me there. Did he get me there? Yeah.
I think he did. Hold on, let me rewind it real quick.
Yeah. So I salute to him.
Yeah, his blade has a nice bend right here.
Yeah.
I can't tell if your sword's hitting him or not. No.
Yeah, I don't.
It was a double or he got you.
Yeah, I don't remember this one at all. That's definitely a good shot, and I do salute it. And so, and I missed this one in the review. I guess it's a double.
I think it was.
Yeah, Trevor's very athletic.
He's definitely a tricky fight. He has a 45-inch blade and he moves it around in a not traditional way. So
yeah, I'm not sure how his shot got through before on my defense. So I don't know if he went around it or whatnot. But in this one, he just gets out of position. And I just sneak it in.
You can see here at the beginning of the slow-mo that he's making a big motion with his sword, kind of casually.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And then I fake throw to get his dagger to move down, and then I finish the extension.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just don't count on being faster than people now, and so most of my shots are throw, wait for the counter, and then hope or plan that my response off the counter is more refined than my opponent's.
I would think that would be a better approach in general for most people, because most people aren't going to be faster than everyone, right? So it scales better, right? If you have that approach.
Well, when you came up to the steps one of the times, I tried to gunsling with you, and you were just not going to have any of that. You just beat me like a drum. And so after that, I was like, note, not faster than John. So, so you won't see me gunslinging with you, after that point. So I think that you can, when you're practicing stuff, if you find that you're faster than someone, that you can take advantage of it. It's not something you want to do against somebody you haven't fought or haven't fought in a long time. If you just don't know, it's not safe. The other thing that's not safe about it, and we're not seeing it in any of these fights, but there was a time when I never relied on the fact that someone was going to call a shot when I threw it. So instead of just trying to gunsling, and then if they don't call it, you're dead, even if they hit you afterward, it's just better to make sure that you've got the only attack line. You parry going in and you parry going out, and that way there's no question.
I super agree with that. So I'm gonna let's see that exchange again. Some interesting stuff. Watch it here, it's slow.
He's very mobile. You don't know where the sword's coming from. because he's waving it around so much, but he's got pretty good control of it.
Yeah.
So I stop attacking because he's starting to defend before I finish the shot. And so it's some nice work, I think, on his part to get out of the, to remove the danger such that I then remove the shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like you just both go past each other here.
Yeah. That's
kind of surprising that someone didn't die in that exchange.
I think we probably said the same thing at the time.
Yeah.
It's like, am I still here?
Yeah, I think that what cost him this fight is he was making a lot of tempos at the edge of range that weren't really gaining him an advantage.
Yeah, boom there, and then
he just stands up.
Yeah, he stands up and and you can see he's just out of position. I think that once his feet go squared here, then he's really struggling. And I'm still not even launched at that point. So
yeah.
Oh.
That is an interesting fight, but that will be for another episode.
Yeah, I remember that fight.
So a lefty here. Do you have a specific approach to lefties, or?
Yeah, it absolutely depends on the lefties. I mentioned it in the discussion, I think the last time. Depending on the lefty, instead of taking, like normally I do palm up or thumb forward for my attack lines. When I'm fighting a lefty, usually what I'll do is thumb up or palm over. And the reason being is that if they're attacking from the outside, then I want to be able to turn my blade up and into it to take away some of that ability of theirs to come from the outside. So that's about all. Sometimes I'll fight lefties left-handed just to mess with them.
Wow, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, because they get a lot of practice fighting right-handed fighters and not so much fighting left-handed fighters typically, and so it can really throw them off.
Well, it makes total sense.
In this particular case, I don't really do much because of if you noticed in most of the fights so far, most of my opponents have let me control the fight. Trevor didn't per se, and Crowley didn't always, but most of the time they're waiting for me to attack and then responding to it. And so when I have Guion is a big guy, and he's not super fast on his feet. And so because of that, I'm not super worried about his offense either. So it gives me kind of free play on what to do.
Makes sense. We'll play the video. Looks like you didn't quite get him on this one.
Yeah, this is a little short.
Yeah.
As you can see, my thumb is up, which gives me a pretty good parry to the outside, but still really good point control. Now, this is where he gets himself into trouble. His guard is low, but he starts drifting his point up.
You mean kind of this angle, like this, right? Like pointing more towards your face.
Yeah. So the guard is down, but then the tip goes up. Well,
he's kind of came back down a little bit here.
And I'm pretty comfortable because he's not throwing shots at me, really.
No.
And as soon as I engage a parry with him at all, then he stops the attack line. So, and the only reason I was able to get that series of shots in is because his tip was up and I was able to get it with my my left hand.
Oh yeah, right. Right there, yeah.
Boom, grab it, hold it for a second, release, stab it.
We'll watch it again real quick. Boom.
He almost gets my arm. I just got lucky in this.
Yeah, it kind of comes down, slaps your wrist a little bit. He definitely seems a little hesitant, and maybe this is far into Queen's Champion, so he's not fighting as confidently.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd seen him in a round or two earlier, and he was just very, confident and aggressive.
And here's I don't remember if I still just watch this foot here.
Yeah, so he's close. He kind of leans back a little bit, and the tip goes up, and there's nothing threatening me.
Yeah, I will also say, I don't usually you shouldn't drop your sword when defending a foot. You usually just have to move your foot, and if you drop your sword, if the foot didn't land, then you're in then you can be killed on a second shot.
Oh yeah, good point.
So.
Yeah, and my guess, because Guillaume is good, my guess is that because of the way I kind of throw forward first and then drop it down, that maybe he thinks that it's going for like his hip or something, and so he's gonna parry that hip shot, and then by the time he realizes it's going all the way down, it's too late.
This is a good point. I do really like this like little micro. You go forward just the tiniest bit before you drop. That's definitely really hard to read that in the moment.
And then heels the bout.
Next video.
But whenever opponent is counterpunching and then their counterpunch weapon is not in line with me, it does create openings for lower line shots.
That makes a ton of sense. So we're in the finals again against Crowley again.
I wonder how many times he's been in the semis or finals.
Quite a few.
This is kind of the same fight you guys saw before. Mostly I'm fighting defensively and trying to create openings without creating risk. I do throw for his hand a number of times.
Well, the sword he's using in this fight has less of a guard on it than the last.
Yeah, there's some contact, but I just never count on stuff. The angle is always pretty similar to that of the sword, so it's easy to ignore. So I'm doing a lot of baiting, not just with my arms and the blade, but also with my feet. And so I'll pretend move to see if they respond. So in this one, it was like with Guillaume, but what Crowley's mistake was here is that he went defensive fighting with a refused sword and a dagger. So it's a free shot on the foot.
What is your opinion if you're using sword and dagger or single or anything that's not case with the offhand, the off foot forward? Do you think it can work or?
I mean, anything can work, of course. Someone of your speed and knowledge could probably make it work, but why would you want to? So right off the bat, it's a free shot on the knee, it's a freer shot on the foot. And the only thing that they can do at that point really is try to get the foot out of the way, which means that they pick up on your movement, which means you're telegraphing, or they try to stab you at the same time. But if you anticipate the the stab, then you could block it with your left hand as you're going in. I do not see an advantage to this form currently. I'd love to hear the debate on it, and there's probably somebody that makes it work. I know that if Brendan fought this style, he can see my foot shots coming, so he might be able to get out of it. So I am telegraphing, so other people might see this one.
I tend to agree with you. That's partially why I asked.
Baited question.
No, I think at a high level, which is the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah.
I don't think sword foot like you have to have your sword foot forward to win at a high level. I think the top level guys are just too fast, and you're costing yourself too much time for your shot, and you're giving up too much from your foot and your offhand being forward like that.
Yeah, and I mean, have you seen anybody at high level make this work?
I can think of two people who do it at a fairly high level in the whole SCA that I know of. That'd be Connor Livingston and I can't remember his name now. He lives in Trimaris. He's a mod, left-handed.
Christian Delani.
Christian, yeah, and they don't do it all the time. They do it sometimes, and it's kind of tricky. But I think they're the exception, not the rule. So.
Yeah, I think it's a free shot. Now, I could see where if you were fighting someone who did not think that they could win and could not catch you, and let's say, a big guy who's moving slow or somebody hurt his knee or something like that, they have limited mobility already. And so they say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant this foot. I can't catch him. Maybe I can bait him in. And I don't believe in baits if you can avoid it. But if you know that you're going to lose otherwise, they bait that foot, wait for you to come in to go for it. And honestly, their only intent at that point in time is to stab you as you go for the foot, knowing that it's coming. Mm-hmm. Because they can't catch you any other way.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by you're not in favor of baits?
Yeah, so I know a lot of people like them. And my thought is, I don't, let me clarify. I throw proactive offensive baits. I don't like leaving my body exposed to people as a bait, hoping that I am faster than they are in getting to it. I would rather, and it's just a preference because I've seen people that have it work. My preference is to cover all of the things that I feel are open and push my opponent to make mistakes that I can then take advantage of. Or offensively bait someone where I am not exposed in any kind of a risk in doing it. So I prefer the offensive bait over the defensive bait.
That's very interesting. Okay, I'm gonna finish what we were watching. You hit him in the foot. That's what we were watching.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's just a gimme shot. Yeah. He never gives that to me again.
Yeah. Well, he literally can't hit you while you're doing this. So
right.
It's
yeah.
Freebie.
Yeah. Freebie. Yeah. I like the freebies.
Yeah. Why make it harder than it has to be?
Yeah. And then we chat and there's some humor and then he heals. So.
Heals. Okay, I'm just gonna fast forward through this then.
We joke about how Brendan said he wasn't all that good or something like that.
Oh, Brendan might have said that.
It's possible.
Marshall's in the way.
So there's nothing exceptional about my form. I try to stay upright. I try to keep my butt under me. I try to keep my feet under me. And then you'll see my little hops there. The hop is a micro adjustment to a range change.
Mm-hmm. I've actually tried to steal that.
Oh, good. Yeah, must mean it must be pretty decent if you're going to take it.
That's some good dagger parries there. It's hard to tell from the angle, but
Yeah, his dagger parries are pretty sharp, and I'm just really not getting any kind of an opening through them. My only openings here, besides that foot shot they gave me, is that when he's coming in on me, I tap his wrist there. But he turns up the offense at that point too.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, the marshals were in the way for a lot of that, so.
Yeah. This was a rough tournament from the standpoint of the number of rounds that it went.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how many, John?
So you remember? I do not. This is one of the few queens I didn't fight in because I was stepping down as Queen's champion. So
yeah.
I think this is one of those two-parters where there was like a Swiss 5. Was this one of them where it was a Swiss 5 and then they take the top and then they kind of double a limb or something like that? And that's 2 out of 3 afterwards.
I think it was a Swiss 5 and then 2 out of 3 single limb, but top 16. So that's 4 rounds. So yeah, and that's whatever.
Yeah.
Many fight double the fights.
Yeah. Doing a snap.
You said what?
Oh, I think
so.
I think this looked like a double kill. So yeah, let's see.
Yeah, I stabbed him with the sword. So I think I just missed his foot there, and he takes advantage of that to attack.
And you get your sword on his, or your left sword on his sword as he comes in, but not enough, I guess.
And so I stab him, but he's close enough that he goes ahead and extends into it.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Nice bend here, dagger here. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why you can't rely on a shot. You've got to keep moving.
Yes. This is not a great place for his main sword to be.
I think he was about to hit me with a rat shot.
It looks like that, or like a falling off, like an offside head or something.
Offside head, crossbody or something. But that's been his style, is that kind of these fluid movements and that kind of thing. But that's bad on me for not getting out of the way once I've connected the shot. And instead I square up. And he hits me with an dagger.
Someone in the chat, sorry, I didn't see this earlier. What's the difference between a defense or offensive feint and defensive feint?
So I had mentioned offensive bait and defensive bait in the last segment. But so I'm going to define all the terms. An offensive bait is where you throw an attack that's not really an attack to get them to react, and in an anticipated way that you had already pre-expected, and then you go around that. That is an offensive bait, which is very similar to an offensive feint. The defensive bait is exposing a body part to harm. It's like the defensive feint, I'm not quite sure what that would be.
Actually, I misread the question. You answered what he was asking.
Oh, okay. It's just there's very little risk in an offensive bait. There is a fair amount of risk in a defensive bait.
Yeah, the question actually wasn't between an offensive bait and a feint. That was the actual question, which I think you answered. But I misread it the first time I read it.
Yeah. They're pretty much the same.
Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Unlike some of the more common forms, as you can see, I try never to set up with my elbow further back than my hip. And I know that it's very popular, and some super successful fighters fight with a refused blade. But because I come from a single fencing background, that's not how I like to play it.
And I would tend to think if you're fighting single sword, you probably do need to have your elbow in front of your hip. I would agree with that. So we'll see this.
Yeah, if your primary defense is your dagger, then your blade doesn't necessarily need to be out there and probably gets in the way. So
this is shown in slow-mo here. Here we go.
His parries are big. He gets that one blade out of the way too far.
Mm-hmm.
I just sneak it in.
I'll also say, does a big, now his off foot is forward here.
Yeah.
And his hands are high. Yeah. Okay, we'll go back to, so let's see. We will watch this champs fight from this Penzik. Assuming I can find the fight in the video. Oh, it's right here. Perfect.
Yeah. And who is this fellow?
I actually do not know. If anyone happens to know who this is and they want to put that in the chat, I would super appreciate it, but I do not remember.
Yeah, I didn't remember this fight. I was trying to watch it. He had a style similar to Trevor's in that he's got his blades in fairly constant motion, and I just guessed better than he did on when the opening was in the middle. Mm-hmm. So that's the problem. The benefit of the circle parry defense, the swimming defense / offense, is that it does clear a lot of blades out of the center line. But if it becomes a predictable pattern like this, then it creates a center line opening at some point in time.
Yeah.
And so all I did was took the center line and made him go around it.
And you almost get him right here, or that was good and he didn't call it, I'm not sure. But because he makes a big swing down.
Yeah, quick pop to the head. But I mean, you can tell there's not a whole lot of bend in my blade. So I keep my form on and I keep going. A couple bad mistakes on my part there were my feet hit. I commented on somebody else's feet like the last time we watched the video. I try not to let my feet come together.
Oh yeah.
And here I do a little bit too much, and then here I do as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Okay. Well, so between watching this next fight, I have a couple other questions that I wrote down. What do you think has been like the main key to your success? Like what has differentiated you from other fighters?
So part of it is the visualization. Before we kind of started these videos, I was talking about visualization. So when I was really gunning for light weapons or heavy weapons or anything like that, every time that I fought someone, it would catalog in my brain. And especially if I lost, I just couldn't get that fight out of my brain. And so I might play that fight 1,000 times in my head, modifying what I did in the fight so that I wouldn't get beaten by that thing again. And it's been really rough, especially going into some of the queens, because all I'd have in my head is Don Galen or any one of the old great guys that that typically beat me and that kind of thing. And so it was rough on sleeping and that kind of thing. So I think that was one of the things, is that I could, if I was ever beaten by someone, I at least got a chance to play through it a lot in my head, and so I would be less likely to suffer for it. The other really good thing for me is two other things really that I could say kind of have given me an advantage. One is that I see my opponent's telegraphs very, very easily. And so I can tell if somebody normally fights in a particular stance and has moved their back foot up at, 1/2 inch or so. Or I know when if their elbow rotates to the outside, that there's a hook shot coming in, and little things like that. So I think a lot of my success has really been from reading my opponents. And then the other thing is that I run a very high standard defense that's nothing flashy or fancy or even all that fun to look at, but it's generally good against almost everyone. And so I think those three things right there have really done it. I'm a little bit quicker than average, but not the fastest guy on the field, either in hand or in foot. And so I think it really comes to that. And then, I've got pretty good reactions. What do you think? Anything else?
I was going to say, you really pick up on when someone's about to attack. I mean, their tells. I mean, you can pick up on that buildup of energy. Yeah, they're really subtle.
Yeah, I can pick up on people's breaths, change in breathing pattern. Sometimes, depending on the lighting, what their eyes are doing, whether they're looking at my foot or their eyes get dilated. I mean, really pretty small things. And back in the epee days, I was accused of hitting people before they were going to throw. It was like, well, no, you were throwing, you just didn't realize it. So I've always been called fast, probably not as much now as I used to be, but I was always called fast. But a lot of it had to do with me stealing time from my opponents by observing their telegraphs and such. And then one last thing is that heavy or light, I never assume that my alpha is going to be the only alpha. And I think this is I wanted to bring it up the last time we were talking with Dominic, but some people, like they have one style and they're going to fight that absolutely same style against everybody. And it's not as obvious in fencing, but if I fight someone who I don't think that I've got better than a 50-50 chance in beating their alpha, or I've got less than that, I will change to a beta stance that pushes them to a beta, counting on the fact that I have a better beta than they have a beta. And so, to that point we were talking about earlier, where guy was, where some people expose their left foot. It could be that they don't figure that they're going to beat people with a normal game, so they're trying to push their opponents to a beta game where they have a better advantage. So sometimes I will do that when I run into somebody who's faster than I am, John.
I think that's a really good point. Something that you told me years ago that really helped my fighting was that I think a lot of people want to fight their best style against their opponent's best style. And they it's like almost an honor thing or something where they're like, oh, that's the way to do it. Mm-hmm. But I want to fight the style that will win the fight.
Yeah.
And if it's not what I'm best at, if it makes them worse at their thing. Exactly. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah, that absolutely. But interesting question. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Okay, watch. This is against Master Davius, the Gulf Wars Champs battle. There's another lefty here as well, who fights Case.
And they're long swords, and he's a tall guy.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of baiting and posturing in this one.
So I think as clear a trend is that you'll keep range until you are pretty happy with the situation, and it's kind of a patience thing.
Yeah, and that would be another thing I'd add to the list. I'm extremely patient. I've had crown tourney bouts that lasted like 30 minutes or more for a single bout. It's like, if it's not right, it's not right, and I'll just keep going until. But my favorite thing to do anymore, over the years, I started back in this about 88, I guess. So the thing that I like to do is, first off, see if my opponent is exposed anywhere, which is hand or foot. Back in the epee days, it was a lot of face shots too, but taking that out of the equation, is their hand exposed? Is their foot exposed? And if not, then it goes into that patience game where I'm just trying to either make them get frustrated with my defense, which some people will do, and then make a mistake, or rush me because they think that's going to work better, because they're frustrated, or if they don't, if they're a defensive counterpuncher, which you saw several times in these bouts, if they're a defensive counterpuncher, then I throw those feints or offensive baits to try and create openings or see patterns. Do people drift their blades up and that kind of thing? And sometimes I'll throw a slow shot to see if that changes the same move. So sometimes you'll see me throw a slow move or a fast move. All of your moves don't have to come at the same speed. And sometimes you can literally just sneak a shot in slowly because people weren't expecting it to come in at that speed. So everything doesn't have to be at absolute rocket speed to win.
The slow blade penetrates. What's the quote from Dune?
Yeah, from Dune. Yeah, exactly. But it's really true. I mean, to a point that Dominic made the last time, right, is that people don't see the cane as a threat. People don't often see a slight, subtle move of your blade, of your one of your blades, as a threat until it's too late.
Let's see, this is slow here, and I think this fight is a good example of you just kind of being patient, and then I think Davius overextends and you get him.
Yeah.
Come on.
But he wasn't giving me much until, I don't think this was slow down.
Yeah.
So I get to strike first. So he starts surging his body forward. So if you see this, he's moving forward. So stop it right there. He's moving forward to attack. He's already in attack range. So I know that he's serious about the move, but his blades are down. If there's any time that you can attack, it is right now. And they teach us in Olympic style fencing is you never move your feet before your blades. Now in the SCA, because we have circular movement and offhand weapons and stuff like that, we can get away with it. But by and large, the point is the pointy thing goes first. And so in this particular move of his, he's surging forward with his body while his guard is down, and there is a free shot there. He can bring up the blades and catch it, but there is a free shot there.
Yeah.
And there it is.
Well, and I know there's styles that have the blades down and refused because it's hard to control, but usually you have at least one of them up to defend yourself.
Yeah.
And you don't do it quite at this close of a range.
And some of you here probably fought me when I fought with my blades down. But when I do it, and this goes to the bait point, when I have fought people who are faster a foot than I am, so Ingrid or Willick or some folks like that, and they do not choose to stay in range to fight me, and I just can't catch them, and I run out of energy chasing them around. What I'll do is I will drop my blades down in what appears to be a bait. So I'm going against my earlier statement. It appears to be a bait. It is a bit of a bait, but all of my mind is on my foot, my posture, my balance, and my opponent's range. And I'm very good at knowing my opponent's range. So if I'll drop my blades down to allow them to feel more comfortable so that they will come in and take an attack at me. And then I'll control the fight using my footwork rather than my blade work. Because sometimes a bait is the only way. So going back on my earlier statement, sometimes a bait is the only way to get somebody to engage with you. And so I have done that.
Very cool. So it's against Matthias from Trimaris. Another lefty. This guy's a very much a counterpuncher.
So you see my form, it doesn't vary a whole lot.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, you need to have your form be somewhat consistent. Otherwise, you don't have any, you have to start with a consistent form. That's true for everyone.
Yeah, that's true, John. And what I was kind of commenting on too is that my initial stance is the kind of the same, but also whenever I move, I try to get back into that stance as quickly as possible. And this is a guy who's playing the same kind of game. He doesn't want to be in there if I'm on attack, so he fades very smoothly back out of the way. And so I'm just not going to chase that beyond, if his form continues to be solid, which it was. Yeah, he's not even letting me get close enough to do a lunge on his feet or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always found him a very tricky fight. For me specifically, because I'm not a patient fighter, so.
You get spoiled with not needing to be, John.
Yeah.
I wasn't patient in the 80s and early 90s.
There's time for me to learn patience. So another question I had, and is an interesting question, is what do you think your weaknesses are? What do you think, what would be the key to beating you, if you're willing to share that?
Yeah, absolutely. All these mistakes you've been seeing all day. Look at that, where my feet are coming together. That's a mistake. So well, I guess I won, but it's a mistake. And it's chess to me. And so outthinking me. For the fighters who are faster than I am, try to bait me into a speed contest. I don't even know. Did I get his arm there?
So he does this big kind of lefty hook. You get it off with your left hand, and then you hit him right.
Oh, I parried him. Yeah.
Yeah, you parry. So you have both of his weapons parried out with your left sword, and then you hit him right here under the armpit.
Yeah.
Right there.
So yeah, and once again, it's because he did that roundhouse shot to begin with that told me what I needed to know, right?
Yeah.
He brings his arm back and around, and if it was a bait, it would have been fine, but it wasn't a bait. And because it's not a bait, it's predictable. And because I stayed in form, although I get out of form here, I get out of the shot. And then because he's throwing from the outside, the sword, his left hand has to go more towards the center. And when it does, then I cross parry out to the side and then strike.
But
so
I will say that even though you did cross step here, as soon as you hit him right here, you're back on your form again, very quick.
Yeah, I just don't, you just don't count anything, you just keep going, you keep throwing and keep a positive attitude and keep going. The ways to beat me, I drift my feet out. When I do drift my foot out, my toe is exposed. Brendan's hit me in it, I don't know, 1,000 times maybe. So I will do that. On occasion, I will drift my sword too far down. And when I do, the top part of my wrist will be exposed. You see the angle right there, right where the sword goes up? Sometimes I'll drift my forearm too far down and then not thinking about it, compensate by bringing the tip up. And whenever you do that, you create a beautiful landing surface for shots towards those little roses I've got right there. So the easiest ways to beat me are to pick apart my form when I get sloppy in a wide stance, hit my my sword when I'm being lazy and I drift down, or a rushing attack. more often than not, I will beat a rushing attack, but it depends on the ferocity of the attack, you know, and whether or not you've got a good shot going into it. I would say if you just throw simple, fast shots at me, they're probably not mostly going to work because I've seen them for 30 years. But if you throw an off timing shot or an off angle shot, so go back to the one where Trevor got me, that was an off angle shot that probably just came right over the top of where I thought that the attack line would be. Brendan's made very good use of off angle shots against me for ages. So those are, anything else?
Yeah, it used to be rushers, but then when you change your style to incorporate the second blade, that kind of really shut that attack down.
Yeah, to Connell's point, you know, I was vulnerable to rushers before I decided that I was vulnerable to rushers and got this old short sword, and that seemed to nip that in the butt pretty good there. Yeah, but good question. Anything else?
Yeah, I usually, when I get you, it's usually in my hands.
Yeah, Connell will hit me in the hand. Brendan will hit me in the foot.
Well, I think that is all the videos I had pulled out. So if you're cool with it, we can go ahead and get questions. If people want to have questions or thoughts.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of bad stuff in there. And one of my bad things is that we're the feet coming together, moving back. So, you know, and then the other thing is sometimes when I wing my shot coming out, if I'm not throwing with my thumb up and instead rotate my hand over to the top, and this, everybody does this to some extent, and what happens is it brings the elbow out to the side. And if you're throwing, you tend to throw from the outside anyway, and you bring that elbow up, then what happens is you get, instead of directional momentum forward, you get rotational momentum. And that's when it will pull your heel up, it'll pull your back foot forward, like you saw with Mahadi there. So you need to keep your elbow under you, and I do too, because as you can see, occasionally I'll do that, and I'll allow myself to extend and then ruin my extend line by twisting my foot and rotating my back foot around.
I'm going to make a point that I think that most high-end fencers will actually have a good answer for this question because they know how they lose, and they're very aware of that because they want to prevent that from happening, right? And so if you're trying to improve your fighting, you need to be very critical of yourself and be like, where are my weaknesses? I need to reduce them and make tactical decisions to have those not come up very often in fights. And so that's why I asked the question, not because you all need to know how to beat Miguel, because everything he says is going to be way harder to do than he made it sound. But it's more the process of how you should think about your own fighting. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And, you know, everyone is beatable. And just the patience of being able to stay alive long enough to see what the mistakes are. And everybody has a pattern. I don't know what my pattern is offhand, but I tell you, you know, if you throw a shot and I parry it out and I parry it out and I parry it out, that's probably my pattern, right? And so if you can then use that timing or whatever to get inside, then you know, that's going to be really, really effective.
Definitely. So people can turn their mics on and ask questions if they would like, or discussions. We can go back to video if someone wanted that or whatever. It can be more free form at this point.
Yeah, I'd love that. And there is one more thing that I would comment on is I don't practice a whole lot anymore or do point control and stuff like that, but every once in a while I still do. And, you know, Kamal and I are working on our lunges and doing a little point control and that kind of thing. But one of the things you'll notice is that whether it was in these, which span like an 8-year period or so, or if you went back a long time, I try to maintain a fairly consistent body weight. In that one, you see a pooch. But, you know, from the time I started winning tournaments in the SCA, I probably won most of my bouts between the weights of 185 and 200. I might have been a little poochier than that in that sixth one that you saw at Nicolette's. But No, I think that physical fitness and all of these things go together. Being limber enough, as you can see, a lot of those lunges were just not very deep because I'm not limber enough, and so I recommend that to everybody to be as limber as you can be.
Someone wrote in the chat that they understood about you bringing your feet close, the critique about bringing your feet close together, but they said, but it appears that it helps you cover enough ground to get out of the way. Hold on, I read that wrong. But it appears to me that when you are doing it, it works to help you cover enough ground to get out of the way. Oh, I think they mean on the retreat. So they're saying that bringing your feet together seems to be working, but.
Yeah, it's an emergency. I'm not moving back far enough thing, and that it's fighting. So you get put into situations you don't plan, and your body just does what it needs to do sometimes to get out of the way. So that's probably this.
I think that ideally you're always keeping your feet in a position where you can go either direction. Sometimes you have to go forward or back so fast that you can't maintain that. But ideally, if you're fighting perfectly, you would always be able to change direction instantly. And that's why you don't cross your feet or bring your feet too close together. That would be my.
Yeah. Is that you, John, or is that somebody else's observation?
That was my observation.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'm pretty sure you told me that, so.
Yeah, is anybody else on who wants to chat? That'd be cool.
Yeah, let's see. Someone's got to have some questions.
How much did your rapier fighting color your rattan fighting and back?
The perception of people's distance and the ability to spot when people were going to attack me was high. The style was, really good for spear and probably for the most part for glaive, which are two of my best weapons. But for sword and shield, it was a slow and painful learning curve because whenever I was pressed too much, I'd cross feet so that my right foot would be forward, by accident, and that was occasionally brutal. So, when I started to Grace, which probably somewhere in the ballpark of when you did, we didn't use thrusting tips, and the first time I won Crown, I didn't win with a thrusting tip, and so none of the thrusting part of fencing came through in winning Crown tournament. And then after I'd won one or two Crown tournaments, then it was things were adapting more in Ansteorra, and the low pros came out and stuff like that. And then they started using it. And then I just kind of all of a sudden became more deadly because they were like, oh, watch it, he's a Don, and so I just waved my point around at them and they move out of the way. So, some things translate, some things don't, Yeah,
I would say that a couple things. I saw one shot in a Crown in recent years where it was a thrust, and it's like, oh, I've been hit by that with a rapier, and I saw it with a rattan, and was like, oh, I mean, that person's head just snapped back. It was like, oh, that looks so painful. Yeah. And then, but separately, before he was using, I mean, he would. This was like a long time ago, but he would get in a habit of fighting sword and axe, and he would threaten with the sword tip, and that would cause the opponent to do something wrong out of character because they were then felt threatened where normally they hadn't had that experience, and then he would come over the top with with an axe and that would also look painful.
Those were some fun ones. Yeah, so I guess from the standpoint of technique, Edmund, I don't think it was particularly helpful. From the standpoint of movement, from being able to spot my opponent's range and from being able to see their telegraphs and stuff, it was helpful. I'll flip it around to you. You started heavy first, so what did you find going from heavy to light first?
So for me, it was, like you said, range was a very natural read. and just being able to read people's body shifts, you know, when their weight's beginning to shift, so you can read the intention a little bit. You don't necessarily, you know, I didn't necessarily understand what they were doing with their hand and their sword, but I can understand what their body was telling me. And so that gave me a little bit of a head start in that respect.
Yeah, makes sense.
One of the
And
things
honestly, right now, I'm trying to convert all my rattan fighting to 16th century stuff. So I'm doing case with primarily thrusts. I've got a Ratella I've started playing with. And actually the last crown I won, I fenced.
Oh.
Like I had to kill a couple people with blades, and I was mad that I had to cut somebody. I'm like, damn it.
One thing I will say, when we, as far as training someone who comes, you know, has a lot of success and history in the heavy field, over into light with Mahadi is, and again, you saw him earlier, he's very tall, but when we started, at some point we were training him when he wanted to become a mod, and one of the first things we all noticed is that he did not use his full range, and you could see it in that fight here. He didn't use his full range with his body, his feet. And so we would do range practice with him, like a lunge, in particular with lunges. And they were like as far as I would lunge, and I am a foot shorter than he is. And so I was like, what are you doing? Yeah. And so as you can see in that, and so that is something I think is probably fairly common that you would see if you're training a heavy fighter, especially someone who's got a long history in heavy fighting, is they're with that more upright position, and they're not using their lunges, and they're, especially if they're tall folks, they don't understand the advantage. They're not taking advantage of their height, their long legs and their long arms. Yeah. And so if you're training someone who's got that history and is also tall, that's something to definitely look out for this and help them. You're not used to that.
For me, I hate lunging, because I am afraid to get 300 pounds moving in a direction with a piece of steel leading it.
Yeah, and that's fair.
Because I fenced early 2000 for a little while, and I ended up breaking somebody's ribs at a fencing event. We were just doing pickups, and I broke it. He was a little guy, but still, and it was the guy who had originally trained me to fight, you know, back in the 80s. And so I felt like an absolute heel when I found out about it. I'm like, I unauthorized myself. And
he deserved it. It's fine.
What's that?
I'm kidding. I am kidding. I feel like breaking the ribs of your teacher is very choice. I like it.
Well, yeah,
John, I'd be careful going forward.
John and I've tried to break each other's ribs many times.
Yeah, I'm always careful.
I'm sensitive, so I took it hard that I had done something horrible, and so like job one for me is not to hit too hard.
Yeah,
I have lost fights because I didn't extend that extra half inch I needed because I thought I was close enough, and it was more important for me to not hurt somebody than to win.
Yeah, I definitely get it. I didn't fight cut and thrust for the longest time, and I've still only fought it twice, but it happened to be the two Kingdom tournaments I won.
And you won.
Yeah, but the point though was that I didn't know if in the crux of it was someone throwing a sword shot at me that I wouldn't, you know, go into a heavy move and smack somebody with a steel sword. That would be way too hard. And so it wasn't until a number of other dukes and that kind of thing started fighting this cut and thrust and nobody died. And I thought, well, I'll peek out into it. But it's something that, you know, I still have only fought twice with cut and thrust.
The cut and thrust doesn't scare me as much that I'm going to hurt somebody else, because blade control is something I've got, right? You know, if I make a half an inch mistake there, it's not nearly as bad as a half an inch with the tip. But the thing is, I've gotten hurt by other people doing cut and thrust because I don't think people really understand that you're swinging a real sword at another human being who has 3 layers of linen and virtue between them and death.
Yeah. The first tournament I fought in cut and thrust, I hope Avery's still on. In the
Yes.
first or second bout of 3, he swiped my knee off. It popped out of socket. And I had asked him before the tournament if he wore knees, and I thought he said no, and he had said yes. And so because I had I had 2 sets of knees there from heavy, but it's like, I looked around and not everybody was wearing them. I didn't want to seem like I'm the weak guy on the block, so I didn't wear them. We get out there and he does this swipe shot, knocks my kneecap right off.
Like, I told you.
What I told him was they were not required, but highly recommended.
Yeah.
He didn't apparently hear the second part of the statement. Not my fault.
Next time you should lead with the second part first.
Yeah, exactly.
I really should put the warnings on front of the spell.
Yeah, exactly.
Highly recommended, but not required.
Someone asked in the chat if you had a preferred method of teaching visualization to students.
Cool.
Which is a really good question.
That is a fantastic question.
Watch my videos.
Yeah. No, this is where it gets very difficult because Connell can't visualize super well. And it's one of those, it's like body awareness. It's difficult to teach other people. I don't have a good method for teaching it. What I try to say is that, and I've told Charlie this before, and I think William too, is as soon as you've had a bout that you, especially if you lose in, just start playing that over in your head. What was your stance when you started? Where did you get hit? I used to have guys keep a record of it, but that writing it down didn't seem to help all that much. But basically just going through, where did I get hit? What was I thinking when I got hit? What was my stance? And then just start, as if you can remember any of it, start with that. And then just start trying to see where you were or what your body would do by doing micro movements as you're playing through those little things. So if you realize that you got hit because they said something funny and you started to do a little salute and they hit you in the hand, then you just start playing with that. It's like, okay, whenever I do anything where I'm going to be at risk, I'll step back first. You just kind of, if you cannot naturally visualize, you're going to have to talk yourself through it, and probably start with videos where you can see the video and then try to remember being in there. Like some of these things I'd never seen. I don't think I'd seen any of these videos before today when John sent them to me. And as I started watching them, my adrenaline just went through the roof because I'm playing through it in my head of what I need to be doing or what I didn't do. And so I'm picking up on, oh, I rotated my foot or I drifted my sword or I did this and that. So I would say that, to go back to the question, if you cannot naturally visualize, start with concrete evidence of what you're doing via video, and then try to associate that with your own memories. And the quicker that you can get to that from the time that you actually experience the memory, the better. I used to spend my entire drive home from Inman's visualizing how it was that he hit me 100 times, and so it was, sometimes I was as wired getting home from practice as I was going to practice because I visualized it while I was driving home. I've missed exits before because I was visualizing fights. I've never hit anybody or anything like that, but it's like you get in the zone and it's like, oh, my exit was like 5 miles ago. So it's like, turn around and go back home. So
I think the biggest thing with me and you is if you told me one thing and you told me it like the same thing 3 times, I still wouldn't get it. But if you told me the same thing like 10 different ways, it finally might click and I might visualize it a different way.
That's
so
interesting.
I think as far as a teaching aspect, the more, I guess, neural connections you can form to it to visualize it, the better it works. So
that's the technique that we took, for the last, I don't know, year or 2 or 3 years before we moved, is
when we would train folks, we would train as a team, and then we would receive training as a team. Yeah. And that I really felt like was really helpful because each person had a different way of explaining something. And it was exactly that. You communicate the exact same thing, but in a different way. And eventually one of those things clicked.
We worked with Monty that way, and he didn't pick up on the stuff I was trying to say or that of Brendan's, but he was picking up on how Connell was saying it. And so, but you know, Brendan,
but they would pick up whatever he was doing. And so, I mean, I think a group effort a lot of times is really helpful.
Absolutely. The best training of my life was the three of you, Miguel and Connell and Brendan. And one of you would usually be able to say it in a way that I could internalize it, that I could visualize it. And it wasn't sometimes all of you could, but sometimes it just needed that one little different turn of phrase for me to actually have an aha moment and understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so for whoever asked that question, you know, you may want to try to, like, you know, one, film what you're doing, review it as soon as you can, and as soon as you're through with a fight that you would really rather have not experienced, start playing through your head, and then ask multiple people who got to see the fight what their perspective was of it until something sinks in. And then if you find somebody that has the same kind of mental approach that you do, then lock onto it and hold on to them for a minute. So as long as you can.
And then in the conversation, you brought up body awareness, and you were the one who brought up, again, this was before smartphones, so it was a pain in the ass to film anything, especially at night. But there would be training sessions where we would have multiple people watching, and then when someone would do their bad habit, pulling an arm back, whatever it was, we would immediately do a buzzer sound. Yeah. And that was very helpful for me, it's helpful for other folks. And that helps you become
attuned to it.
But also it's like I think what goes hand in hand with with visualization is body awareness. And so if you're not really body aware, it's hard for you to visualize. I think the two are connected. And so having that instant buzzer that says, oh, you've pulled your arm back and you buzz, you're like, oh crap, my arm's back. Yeah. And then you can, I think that helps with the visualization as well.
Yeah, the sooner that you can conclude the error with the movement, the better. So the more rapid it is, the better off. That's a good point. I got to step away for like 30 seconds. Be right back.
Just don't do it to your student when they're in the middle of a tournament fight.
So something that I found useful with training my students about visualizing and that sort of thing is that we do kind of the team approach where a bunch of us watch someone fighting, and as soon as they come off the field, we go down the line and talk about what we saw, so that they kind of learn the vocabulary. And sometimes it's a matter of training themselves to describe the fight, so that they have that frame of reference to be able to use. And it also teaches them to treat practice like a learning opportunity, even if they're primarily the student, because they may have seen something that a senior fighter did that no one else caught.
I will say one thing, depending on where someone is, having the person who just fought, if you're teaching someone, having them try to describe what happened in the fight before a third person gives the feedback. I read some studies that show that helps them learn to visualize the fight, and they can learn to not be so reliant on a coach.
So like say they just come off the field or they just come off of a practice fight, and you have them describe it.
You say, what do you think happened?
Okay.
And then
that's not a nice idea.
And then once they have done that, then you can say, well, I saw this, or then you go watch the video or something, whatever, right? But having them have to do it first, it kind of empowers them, and it also makes it so that they don't learn to have to be reliant on having a coach all the time, right? Because some of the idea of visualization is even before a fight is over, but in a break, or maybe it's a 2 out of 3 after the pass, you might want to make an adjustment in your fight. And if you can't self-critique and visualize, like we don't get to go to our corner, right, and have our trainer tell us things. We have to do it ourselves.
It'd be nice, but
I find that sometimes going to the trainer can be a mind screw, because if I have to do that and they tell me, sometimes it doesn't always click in the moment, and it takes a little bit to digest, and then I'll go into the fight completely worse off than if I would have just made the adjustment on my own.
Yeah.
And there are many times where I leave the field, the tournament, and go home, and I'll be thinking about one fight for the whole drive home. I mean, so
that's a really good point, Charlie. The cognitive dissonance between what you're thinking and what somebody's telling you. And that's why I think that it's important to have someone you trust and that has a similar thinking pattern to you coaching you during a tournament. And so for heavy or light, I have a couple of people that I rely on that will say things in some way that is not going to provide cognitive dissonance, to your point, Charlie, so that I can understand, and it doesn't throw my game off.
I also think one of the things that we end up with is, especially when working with our students, we need to take the time to realize that being able to watch the fight and see where somebody's doing something, that's as much of a learned skill as actually doing the fight. And one of the things we've done in the past, and John, I'd like to get back to it when we're able to, is we do a circle of death. Everybody has to go in the middle, fight everybody, cycle through, next person fights everybody, so on and so forth. But at the end of it, everybody has to make a commentary about everybody else. What did they do well? What did they not do well? Whatever. But it's not just the feedback that you get, pretty quickly afterwards. So you do that, but it's also teaching other people, what are you seeing? Because I think a lot of us, when we very first started, we'd watch a fight and somebody would say, oh, well, they did this, this, and this. And you're like, how the hell did you know that? Because you don't know what to look for yet. And I think, when you first started coming back, Miguel, the first time you and I really started, working together a little bit and do stuff, there were some times where you'd come over to me and say, hey, I saw you do this, this, and this. And I'm like, how the hell did you see that? I have no idea what, and then I'd take it apart and I was able to break it down. But it's building not just the ability to accept that critique, but also figuring out where the critique's coming from so you can see it, in yourself and in others. And then, going to what John said, in the middle of a fight, you can step back and go, they did that. Okay, because of this, this, and this, I can now take that apart.
Out of range, of course.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Details, but yeah, I think that we undercut sometimes the ability to also, teach our students not just to fight well, but also to be able to see the fight well.
Hey, John, you made a statement a moment ago, and I wanted to jump back to it, and because it echoes a question from earlier. Of the question that you pointed out was that we don't have time to go to our corners, and that triggered in my mind something that what is one of my strengths, and I don't know why I didn't think about this, but we used to teach a class on the OODA loop. And so one of my strengths is the ability to observe my opponent's fighting in fight, take a step back, process it all, and adapt my fighting to what they are currently doing. And so I'm not going to go into the lecture, but the OODA loop was a concept created by a fighter pilot named Colonel Boyd. And it stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And so whenever you go into a pass and it doesn't go the way you want, you've observed certain things. You then need to step back and orient that in your mind as to what happened. And then you make a decision on what approach you're going to take. And then you step in and you act upon it. And the faster that you can do this OODA loop cycle compared to your opponent, the more likely it is that you'll win, even if your opponent is an equal or slightly better fighter.
I'd really like to learn that at some point.
I think you at one point had a handout for a class you taught. Do you think maybe that's something you could send a link to on somewhere.
Yeah.
Not today, but maybe in the next. For people here that might want to read that, I know I have a copy somewhere in my.
Yeah. I'll send it to you, John, or something. You can.
So the one thing that you told me was not only do you want to do that cycle faster, you want to break into their cycle somewhere in between.
That's how to beat Charlie's dad. So, Charlie's dad had a pattern that he would start, and if you let him get to the end of that pattern, it was going to be very bad for you. And so what I have
stops popping the double mint gum.
Well, and so what you do is you'd reach out and tap his blade in the middle of this pattern he'd set up, and it would destroy his pattern. So to Charlie's point, it's you get inside of your opponent's decision loop or his pattern, and you disrupt these sequences so that you can then take advantage of them.
Combo blocker.
Yeah. Do you do anything like that, John? Or
so I'm a very straightforward fighter. So if I can, I just want to kill them, like just one shot them and move on, right? Like I'm not like I want to keep it as simple as possible. If there's fighters that are a higher level that I really feel like I have to have a strategy for or employ tactics, I'll think about it's like, okay, what do they want to do? I'm going to try to deny them that, disrupt their pattern. There's some fighters that I know, like they're really, really fast from a very set point. And so I don't want to set with them. I'm going to move forward or back and keep their feet moving. I know I also know that sometimes that's something that my opponent will want to do to me because I'm pretty good from a set point. And so they're going to try to keep me from moving. And so then I try to think about how to exploit that. So I definitely try to have that in my head. But I only worry about that for like the higher end. Most of the time, I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, kill.
Well, I guess to use an example from the material, your pump fakes when you're thrusting, that's an example of breaking the OODA loop because everything's moving on a tempo and you broke the tempo that they were accustomed to and then stabbed, breaking their decision-making down from a decisive parry to something that they weren't accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
That's how I've had to adjust to you, John, as I noticed that you were extremely effective from a certain set range, in which I found out by being hit way too many times. And then what I did was denied that range, which made it harder for you. And so did it give me a chance to win? No, but it was less hitty on your point. So yeah.
It's about percentages, right? Like that's how I look at it. It's like if the fight is this way, I'll have this percentage to win. And so and if I make the fight this way, then my percentage to win goes up or down. And so I want to either go or avoid those situations.
Question, if you have time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Miguel, earlier you mentioned feeling a lot of adrenaline when you're watching videos of yourself. It sounded like you indicated that was detrimental.
It's painful. I mean, my adrenaline really gets going, and I have to bounce around while I'm watching it because all of that energy that's building up.
Yeah.
And I can't. That's why I just don't watch videos. I can watch videos of other fighters and stuff like that pretty well, but man, 20 seconds of the video with me, and it's like I'm ready to go. And that's just, it's hard to watch. Like all of the videos we just watched, I had to watch earlier today. I watched most of them anyway, just so that I do I remember this fight? Where was I? And why do I look so terrible and stuff like that? But in watching those, someone is attacking me and my brain clicks into gear and I'm in that fight. And so I'm literally sitting here dancing around in my head, replaying the fight. And so, yeah, it's rough. And then, if I start it too late in the day, like if I start thinking too late in the day, I will not sleep at all. And so,
that makes sense. So that would be very fatiguing. That makes sense.
Yeah, and it is. So, man, the early queens were rough because, it was there was always somebody that was better than I was. And I was like, well, how do I beat them? And I played through that for 4 or 5 hours. And then, I go on to the next guy, but either heavy or light. And so, yeah, it wears me out. Does it wear you out or no?
It doesn't wear me out. But so my next question was, did you have any issues with like adrenaline or distractions in tournaments when you were getting started?
No.
Cool. That might be why I used it as a tool. Essentially, I used that adrenaline as a tool to teach myself to be okay. Because for some reason, in a high-level fight, I would get distracted by people watching or whatever. So I had to pretend I was in a high-level tournament over and over and over again until I got used to it, so it wouldn't affect me at all. Yeah,
that makes sense. And because I had the opposite problem. It's like a gunshot could go off field and it'd be like, meh. I was, and that's why I don't need warm-ups or anything like that. It's like when I step onto the field and say lay on, it's like the world disappears and I've got an opponent. And so
got it. Cool. I had to train myself to get there, but now if a gun goes off, I wouldn't notice. Now I'm in the zone, but I had to train to get there.
How did you train for that?
By visualization. Of course. But same thing, if I pretend that I was in a tournament, even if I hadn't been in a high-level tournament before, I would watch high-level tournaments. I would try to really empathize with the fighters, like watching John or Miguel. And then all of my successes, the more intense it was, I would try to replay that over and over and over and over, even at practice, so that I would have that adrenaline rush at practice. So I got used to it, because I used to get nauseous at champs fights and stuff. It'll happen some, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to.
I actually had that's very, very similar to what I did with what Rowan did, because I would get so nervous when I first started fighting in tournaments that I fought really poorly. And so I was watching a video of a tournament. I think it was actually a crown. It wasn't even a rapier tournament on YouTube. That was good. And I found myself, I was like, man, I'm getting nervous just like how I felt when I fight in a tournament. And so I was like, oh, so this is a good opportunity. So I just watched a ton of videos so that I would get used to that feeling of being nervous and just kind of get more comfortable with it.
That is interesting.
Adrenaline works like a neurotransmitter. And so some people are going to be just naturally more sensitive to it than others. And so some people are not sensitive to it, such that they have to have a really extreme experience before they really can feel it. So, something, death defying, like, jumping out of an airplane, and then other things that would perhaps make most other people have an adrenaline rush, like a near miss in a traffic accident. For those folks, they're kind of desensitized to it. And so they don't get the same feeling. And so, but the opposite is quite true for a lot of folks. They're sensitive to adrenaline, and so it can be quite a detriment. I am very sensitive to it, such that I have to warm up, and it's not hey, I've got to make my muscles are actually cold and I need to warm them up. I actually have to work off my adrenaline, such that when I have that second surge during the actual tournament, I'm not as sensitive to it, because the first surge, it wipes me out. I can't even focus. My eyes are dilated. There's just so many things going on. My blood sugar drops. And it's not just me. A lot of folks go through that. Certainly. And so that's why for those folks, having that, having a hard but short practice right before a tournament, like the morning warm up before the tournament, can be helpful to just deal with that adrenaline, to just get that kind of out of the way and get your body kind of mellowed out, such that when you get that second surge, it just kind of wakes you up instead of overwhelms you.
So like the last crown tournament y'all won, that was my first crown tournament to enter. And like the whole month before, I was low OP, like probably second to choose or something like that. So I already knew who I was going to challenge, and I had like high blood pressure for the month because I was busy playing the fight in my head. I knew what they were going to throw. I knew what I was going to throw in response, and I was playing every scenario of how that was going to open. And so my blood pressure just went boop, 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 boop. This hard heart rate and high blood pressure until crown was over. And it was nice that y'all won too.
You should not think about fighting while you drive.
Yeah. I do have an odd question for everybody, and it's because of this adrenaline point that came up. And normally I wouldn't bring something like this up, but it's a bunch of high-level fighters, so I'm really curious. So whenever I've been in a tournament and somebody's really jumped in my shorts, it's actually made me more effective because my adrenaline surges all of a sudden, because I normally maintain a pretty even keel, as you can see from most of those fights. But if somebody really jumps on me, I seem to react faster. And here comes the part of the question. So I've been in near car wrecks or car wrecks where for me, time slowed down. And I was able to navigate through situations, including driving backwards on the highway about 70, 65 miles an hour. When I spun out and hit the railing and was backing up and people were passing on both sides. But there's something about crisis situations where everything just seems to calm down for me and I'm able to act. Do any of you, or it seems like some of you guys would run into that kind of a thing as well.
Definitely, absolutely.
Yeah.
However, during a tournament, like during times when I want to perform well, I actually encourage adrenaline because it causes hyperfocus. It doesn't cause any distractions. It doesn't cause any difficulties. But there's also that slowdown that they experience with high adrenaline.
Do you get it in tournaments? I don't notice it in tournaments like in the cars stuff, but
it's really less severe.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
You don't get the tournament stuff anymore because it's old hat now.
Yeah.
Gabriel?
That's a good point. What about you, Edmund? Do you run into that at all?
I've had a couple of instances where random things happen, deer run out in the road kind of thing, and it's a total control thing. It's like it just locks me into I see what's happening, and I think because of having gone through those adrenaline rushes fighting and having learned how to manage them, that I don't overreact to that adrenaline now, and I can just use it to do what it's supposed to do, which is make me act quickly and appropriately, as opposed to freaking out and overreacting. Because I used to get those, used to watch videos back when they were actual videos, on the cassettes with the tape and everything. For you kids, you look it up on YouTube or something. And you'd watch those videos, or I'd visualize while I was driving, and I'd find myself doing 7 miles an hour in the 45 zone because the adrenaline, I'd started getting pumped up, and eventually I learned how to get that under control. And then now it's like I walk into the finals of some big turn, and it's like, oh, this is cool. Yeah, let's go do some sticks. It's not a crisis anymore.
It's interesting. Two of the videos are one of the videos that was shown was that fight with you and I and Nicolette's Queens. There's part of me was because John said, oh, there's some older videos, and there's part of me that really wishes that there had been somebody had taped your and my fight from Cat's Queens, because that was 96.
Well, I have when we moved, I found a box of old high eights that I want to put them on, and I know most of them are going to be fencing tournaments, because we might have.
But the reason
I might have videoed that because
the reason why I'd love to see it is because talking about what His Grace Edmund was talking about, when you and I went up against each other in Nicolette's Queens, my reaction was, okay, it's Miguel. I know where I'm in the deep end of the pool now, but I'm ready for this. We can deal with it. When I got paired against you in Cat's Queens, I'd been fighting for like 2.5 years. And, I just happened to have a really, really, really good day that day. And I remember at one point before our fight, I was so out of my league. I found Oila was the only one that I could, at the point that I was like, okay, I can try. And I said, what the hell do I do? I mean, I got to go fight Miguel. And oh my God. And his entire response being Oila was, well, what do you want to do? Thanks, Oyla. Yeah, and the only thing that came out of my mouth, because I had no other thing, was I don't want to suck. I don't care if I lose. I just don't want to look like an idiot.
Come on,
you know?
Avery. Come on.
Yeah, but it was the emotional feeling going into that fight was night and day versus, you know, Nicolette's or, you know, going into the finals of Jillian's, going in the final of Sonia's, whatever. It was just like, at that point, it was like, okay, it's another fight.
Yeah.
But back then, oh dear God, what am I doing?
It was also like 120 degrees on site.
It was actually it was probably at the time, it was the hottest year on record. It was 90.
Yeah. Well, because we were supposed to be in the shade and the tornado had hit the site a week and a half before. So we were in the middle of a blasted field with no shade. Yeah.
I think Gabriel wanted to say something.
Yep.
So I have this theory about fighting that there are times when it gets way too fast for you to follow it through when you're thinking. You know, if somebody starts coming at you with a flurry of lunges, there's no way you can think through what's going to happen next, And the point of fighting, or training to fight, is to get to the point where the mechanics work on autopilot. And so you can step back and look at the big picture about, okay, trust your body and your defense to handle the flurry. What are you going to do when the guy trips or when he pauses because he hasn't hit you? And that's when I think, like, when the adrenaline hits, why certain situations seem to work out is because the adrenaline stops you from trying to think through it and you go into autopilot. But only in situations that you train for, which is why you might pull off a flawless high-level fight in the finals of a tournament, but when a deer runs across the road, you panic and slam on the brakes and skid into a tree. It's all about what have you prepared for that you can actually engage your autopilot you have an autopilot for.
I agree with that.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Gabriel, if you're out of your depth, adrenaline is your enemy. If you're not prepared, I was thinking back to when I first started martial arts, when we'd have sparring days, and adrenaline just made me afraid. I remember when things slowed down, back to Miguel, to your point, as I sparred more and got better after, 6 years of martial arts, it slowed down. The adrenaline wasn't a bother anymore. And I think when you're out of your depth, adrenaline can really be, like I said, your enemy. But if you are prepared, which I am only partially so with this sport, if you're prepared, the adrenaline is not your enemy, and it can actually kick you into that lizard brain thing, and you just deal with it. Whether it's you're a good driver and something happens, because I had a similar situation that I didn't know I was prepared for, but I was.
I think that's also, I think
you can prepare.
Oh, go ahead, Edwin.
So I think if you put yourself in adrenaline-filled situations that are diverse enough, you can train yourself to deal with adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
I think you have to train, like it's a skill, just like any other skill in fighting.
If you experience different adrenaline rushes in different activities, you can train yourself to manage the adrenaline rush. So that when you get hit with it in a new situation, you know how to not let it take over and just use it.
I'm curious how the fight and flight reactions fit into this, because they're both adrenaline spawned. So I'm curious if you tend to be more of a fight response person than a flight response person. Does that change your reactions when you're all of a sudden in an adrenaline rush?
No.
Elaborate, Ron?
I suppose it depends on if there's a flight option.
Yeah.
There's not.
Yeah.
Like you can't jump out of the car seat to avoid the deer. You got to grab the wheel and do something.
Yeah.
So you're familiar with that fight or flight response mechanism comes from in the brain, right? It's your amygdala, right? well, that's in my temporal lobe. That's also where my seizures come from. So that gets pinged on full whenever I have a seizure. So before I go unconscious, that sucker gets flipped on and the adrenaline goes nuts. So like I've been in car wrecks and been perfectly calm, and I could see it's that time slowdown thing you're talking about. I was able to see individual pieces of asphalt while I was upside down.
Wow.
So at 70 miles an hour. But yeah, so I mean, I've played pretty well, though I get the handshakes every now and again when I stop. You know, does anybody get that? Like,
oh, I get that. My hands get hot. Like if I have a near miss on a when I'm driving, I deal with it. I mean, I'm a pretty confident driver, so I don't panic when I drive, but I'll get that my hands will all of a sudden get hot afterwards, hot and tingly.
It's mostly when I have unused adrenaline that I stop fighting, and it's like, okay, I've got this and I'm not using it, and what do I do with it? You know, so
it's interesting. Gwyneth talks about with the unused adrenaline about the first time she fought in a heavy melee was at a Gulf Wars, and she went out there and people banging their shields and getting each other, and she's standing there going, okay, and she went out and the armies hit each other, and she's poked at a few people, and then somebody hit her in the head, and she walked off the field, and as she's walking off the field, suddenly felt like she was having like a panic attack or something, and had no idea what the hell was going on, because that's when the adrenaline hit her, and she had no idea what to do with it at that point.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point to turn it back into the tourney kind of questions, John. I guess if you had a sense for what other people's reactions to adrenaline were, you could, in theory, use that against them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you knew that, it's going to amp me up to jump on me, maybe you don't do that. But if you know it's going to like get somebody all ramped up, and then you step back out of the way and let that calm down, maybe you mess with them. So, I mean, that's a really high level of psychological fighting, but it's interesting.
I will sometimes, and this is one of the reasons I think not having a really strict routine as you walk out on the field is important, because there's sometimes where I want to give off an air of that I'm like hurt. I'm trying to rush my opponent, like not rush them physically, but like make them hurry up. And right. And so like I'll stand closer to the middle of the field, or sometimes even I'll stand like when the marshals hold the sticks up, I'll sometimes even stand like right up to that. And there's other times where I'd like, no, I want the fight to be slower. I need the field is small or whatever. I need to take my time, and I'll stand as far away from my opponent as I could in the very edge of the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of depends on how I feel and how I think my opponent will react to that. It's more about how I feel, honestly, than how I'm more about my opponent feeling. But my approach is not the same every time. I like being able to be flexible with that. And sometimes
you can steer your opponent's energy. Yeah. I know it sounds hippy dippy and all that stuff, but it really does work. Like you can, get them amped up so they overreact to everything, and then just throw the subtlest fake and watch them, block the ceiling and then just bust them.
Yeah. I think Brendan uses that a lot, where he tries to manage his opponent's energy, either by getting them amped up, and then doing some action that does not register a threat. That's because it's subtle, and then they're like, "How did you hit me?" Because they're expecting something more obvious.
There are fighters that are very difficult to beat when they're at high energy. So you just start bringing your energy level down. You can watch their energy level drop, and they get sloppy. And they're, if they're not completely ramped up, they're just not nearly as good. I can't remember who offhand, but I know I've done that before.
Shay.
Sounds about right.
And Modius.
She's saying Modius.
Yeah.
That used to be, that was a big one.
Shay was great when he was amped up, though. Woof.
Yeah. Well, you could see the smile through the mask. Yeah. But slow it down. But yeah. Gabriel, you were going to say something?
Sorry.
No, I'm not muted.
tying that question of fight or flight into an earlier topic that Miguel asked, I have another theory. And I know there's a bunch of crossovers we're here in this meeting. I want to know what everybody's thoughts are on it. Not just crossover rapier or tan, but other martial arts in general. I think the single biggest thing that somebody can take from one combat sport to another is learning to deal with a fight or flight instinct, in the sense that learning that fight is an option. Because we're not really a violent society, in general. And a lot of people who come into a hobby have never learned that they can actually stand up and block a shot and hit back. And so whether it's rattan, MMA, boxing, rapier, whatever, the fact that you've learned that, that you've rewired your brain to be able to say, no, stop that and hit back. I think the rest that follows and pick up a new form is just the mechanics of it. Thoughts on that?
I think it's an interesting point.
Well, I always say, do it on your terms. I think the biggest thing that I've done to control that mechanism is simple breathing exercises, 4 in, 4 out, Zen breathing type situation. Learned that from Zen in the martial arts. And honestly, it's helped me health-wise. Anytime I want to not go unconscious involuntarily, I will do breathing exercises to control that adrenaline, to stop me from speeding up my brain, my heart rate, etc. And you can calm yourself down. You can let it take over if you like and speed it up. If you have better control over that mechanism, you can let it do what you want it to. So I find that simple breathing, or not breathing, or speeding up your breathing, slowing down your breathing, that'll help sort that out, for me at least.
Gabriel, there was an experiment that Inman did when I was a fairly new student in his backyard. And I'd been fighting maybe a year or something like that. And I was pretty good against, Gunther and Mahadi from time to time, but not really high level. But Inman just always just took me apart. And he and I were fighting, and he hit me like 5 times in a row or something like that. And
I remember that.
yeah, and he came up to me, and that mean old man came up and grabbed me by the collar and said, "Miguel, I am going to kill you." I said, "Yes, Your Grace." And we fought, and he hit me again. And he came up and he violently grabbed me and he pulled me into his face and he said, "Blankety blank, Miguel, I am going to kill you." And he let go of me, and I must have blocked 10, 20 shots of that old man and then hit him in the leg or something like that. And he was like, "Good." And that's my point. And so I'm wondering, Gabriel, if he was doing that kind of experiment with me to make me see it as more of a real threat than just a, "Hey, we're in a hobby and I'm hitting you with a stick."
That makes sense.
I mean, I think a lot of people have never experienced like hitting someone and it not being a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not like it to a certain extent. What we are doing is we are still playing, right?
Yeah.
We're playing. There's sometimes high stakes in tournaments or whatever, but and being able to say, okay, no, right now this fight is pretty real because I want to win this fight. And then as soon as it's over, being like, "Oh yeah, we're friends again," right? And I think that kind of being able to turn that on off, I think a lot of people have a hard time if they didn't play. That might be a sports, not even just a martial art thing. That might just be a sport, like even more generically a sports thing.
I do also think that it's also a difference between the rapier field and the heavy field, that there is I don't have another way to phrase it, inherent level of violence on the heavy field that you just do not get on the rapier field. And for me, when I was fighting heavy, and I never was.
We're working to fix that.
Yep. As I said, hey, Patty Gamison's my friend. But there was never that. There's just a different feeling there. And, I've always said, I think I'm good on the rapier field. I've had some days where I was very good, but I've never been at that elite level. But on the heavy field, I've always been, I just play at it, because for me, the trigger in my brain when I get hit on the heavy field and somebody like lights up my leg or hits me in the back or whatever is my brain says, we're done. That hurts. I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm walking off the field. Whereas on the rapier field, even in CNT, times where John and I have been fighting and I stepped into something wrong, and got lit up, or Gwyneth, when she first got her longsword, if I made a mistake and suddenly, here's a platter of ribs being served up, it never was that mentally or emotionally, it never hit me the same, or bad phrase, but it never got into my brain the same way. On the heavy field, I get hit with the club and my brain shuts down and I'm done. And I don't know where the difference is there, but for whatever reason, it affects me differently.
So I have had similar experiences, but it's more like my fight or flight is fight. And so when and I'm not talking about like before a tournament and I get an adrenaline rush. I mean, in the situation where someone has hit me and it hurts, then I'm like, I'm done and I'm ready to go for real. But then the other part of my brain says, no, you can't do this. This person is my friend. And there's this real fight in my brain between I'm ready to just turn it on and go after it versus no, that's wrong. This person's your friend. You just have to put up with the fact that it hurts, or whatever. And so to me, there is a battle there between letting myself get to that point and just letting it, letting out that part of me versus these are my friends. And so I wonder if, it would be great to have some sort of, mental training to deal with that. But I think it's similar to what you're probably experiencing, because you're like, oh, I'm done. I bet if you experience that walking downtown, it wouldn't be, oh, I'm done, I'm walking away.
Oh, no.
You don't have that option. You don't have the option.
Yeah, I've actually had that happen on more than one occasion, and the response has been less than pleasant for those involved. But so for whatever reason,
how do we allow ourselves that level of bringing out that level of aggression, but it's still controlled and fair,
right,
for what we're doing? And I don't know the answer to that. That one is that's a big challenge for me. And so a lot of that, to get in that mindset of, okay, it's really on, I have to really tamp that down because I don't want to lose control. So I don't know. And I imagine that I'm not the only one. So I'd be curious how other folks think about it in a way that they can have a more balanced approach, where it's not either on or off, it's just balanced.
That's got to be some combination of your background, your history in life, as well as your history in fighting. Because to this day, if I really want to win a tournament, before it starts, I have to get somebody to clobber me in the head real hard, because that engages my reflexes to suddenly turn on. I don't do anything like that for rapier, but maybe I should.
I do it for rapier, like do a little bit of cut and thrust warm up. It kind of gets you.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the adrenaline thing or what, but it's, and I know that would have a complete opposite effect on a number of other people. So,
so I want to say I don't 100% agree with Avery. I'm very new to heavy fighting, so it's hard to know the difference. But I think at the very high end of rapier, I don't really know if I think of that fight as being, it's obviously less physical because of the rules that we have, and it doesn't hurt as much to get hit. But it's, to me in that moment, it's pretty real. Like I really want to win, and I'm going against this person, and they're an obstacle to me winning, and I'm trying to kill them and try to not let them hit me. And I'm not, if I'm fighting my brother or someone at, like some of these high end guys, I'm not going to pull that shot really. Like I'm going to hit them a harder, and I'm not trying to hurt them, but if it happens, I'll apologize. And, and I expect them to do the same to me, because I want their whole fight. And so I don't think that, and part of it is I just don't like that way, that framing it of rapier being kind of less real. It's just a different sport with different rules.
Right. And real, it's not real or not. It's that there on the armored field, it is more violent.
It's more physical. It's like,
right.
I would look at it more like the difference between like football and basketball. It's like
Exactly.
they're both very hard sports that require a lot of skill and physicality to play, but one hurts more.
Right, and that's where I was trying to go. That's actually more, not saying that one is more real than the other. It's just that for me personally, one involves much more physical pain, yes. And my brain says, no, we don't like that. Yes. Therefore, I don't want to play that.
And I think low end rapier fighting is a lot more just tag with swords than maybe low end heavy fighting is, but I wouldn't know as much to say that. But like I mean, it doesn't. The limited heavy fighting I have, it feels different, but it doesn't feel like fighting in the finals of Queens or at finals of the Rose Tourney at Penzic or Gulf Wars. That feels pretty intense to me and pretty
very much so.
Like I'm in a real fight at that point.
Be right back.
But I think I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. We can still chat a little longer, but since the video is getting a little long. So thanks for the recording, guys. Thanks for everyone for watching. Not 100% sure who I'm gonna have on next week. Thank you, Miguel, for being on and being willing to do this.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe if you find those old videos, we'll do another episode with you from the.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
that would be awesome.
Yeah, you could put some clown music to it.
All right, so you guys have a good one.
Yeah, you too, John.
Stop the recording.